All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome to the webinar, fifth installment of our series. Last time we met, you actually met with my business partner, Phil Burton. I hope that you all had a wonderful time with him. I know that you talked about focus and perspective and storytelling. And I do hope that you found value in that. It's a huge, huge focus of our company. And when we're working with clients one-to-one, for those of you who are engaged in some of the huddles and some of that coaching, you probably have noticed that's somewhat of a theme, is shifting mindsets and taking new perspective on things. I also know that the mental clutter has to be at a pretty all-time high right now. Those of you who are dealing with mixed mode learning right now. So I heard you're transitioning some kids back into the classroom. And so you probably have a lot of mental clutter going on right now with trying to manage those kids who are still virtual versus those kids who are now in person, which is great. But I'm sure it's producing a lot of that. So I do hope that some of the strategies that we covered last month, the last time that you spoke with Phil, became applicable to you. Hopefully you're seeing parallels too in all of these webinars and some sort of common themes that are emerging from them. So this time we have 2 webinars left. We're going to be covering the second part of our mind pathway today, which is emotions, emotional curiosity is what we call it. And then in our final webinar coming up next month, we're going to be focusing on setting healthy boundaries and the importance of core values and how those things interact, and a little bit of planning for the future, action planning. So hopefully you'll be there. But to get us started, we're going to be talking about emotional awareness today, and what we use, which is a tool called emotional energy quadrants. The first thing I want you to do, again, for those of you just joining, I did give you a little bit of warning, those who were on earlier, that we're going to be needing pen and paper, going to be doing a lot of reflection tonight, a lot of activity on your end. So I want to engage you as the learner today. And I really would love to lean on the chat, because that's my only way in these webinars of communicating with you. So make sure that you're using it when you are comfortable doing so. The first thing I want you to do, as you can see here on the screen, is I just want you to kind of get connected to the content. So what I'd like you to do is list 3 emotions that are most persistent for you in the last week. So take a moment, list 3 emotions that are most persistent for you this past week. Now, we were on spring break, so it was a little bit more low-key and positive around the house here, but we are back full swing into school and work mode. So the emotions are all over the place today. So for those of you who are comfortable sharing, can you put in the chat, what are 3 emotions that are most persistent for you in the past week? And for those of you who are not comfortable sharing, just write that down, kind of keep it with you as we're talking about these strategies and the science around emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. If anybody wants to share, go ahead and put that in the chat for me. Thank you. So overwhelmed, emotional, tired. Frustration, stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. I am not surprised by the pattern coming out here. Maria says stress, anxiety, pressure. Yeah, so it sounds like it's been a pretty tough week. I would imagine this is a persistent theme these past several weeks, year, right? Excited, nervous, and hopeful. I like it. There we go. So we have kind of a mix of some sort of survival-based emotion, some opportunity. Good. Thank you for sharing these. Really appreciate it. So keep those with you. I want you to try to keep them as context for the content that we're going to be talking about today. And for those of you who did share in the chat, thank you so much for doing so. So what I wanted to do there is just try to get you connected to listing emotions, and just sort of connecting to emotions that you feel, but also just actually physically naming those emotions. Layla says optimistic, hopeful, and resilient. I love that. That's great. So we got some people who are a little bit more on the, well, you'll see, positive based emotions. Some of you are still feeling that kind of survival based negative emotions. What's really, really interesting when you look at the research in emotions and emotional intelligence, Did you know that we actually have 34,000 distinguishable human emotions that we can feel? Who knew we were that complicated? We're not going to list them out tonight, don't worry. But we're going to attempt to kind of categorize them a little bit. You can kind of categorize emotions generally. Most people do it this way, based on whether they're positive and negative and what they mobilize us to do. The primary function of emotions, this is important. The primary function of emotions is to provide information to us and mobilize us to do something. They also help us connect with other people, particularly when we connect with our own emotions. We're better skilled and able to connect with others. So the primary function of emotion, and if you look at the definition of emotion over there in the root, you can see that it's active in nature, is to provide us information and to mobilize us to do something. Our emotions are very closely connected and actually live in the same area that our stress response and fight or flight areas. Remember the first webinar, I showed you those three parts of the brain: reptile brain, limbic brain, and then the high performance hub. The limbic brain is where emotions live, and that plays a key role in our stress response and our survival. What you're looking at on the screen now is something that a researcher named Dr. Plutchik came up with in 2001, so 20 years ago now. And this wheel of emotions is still used today in emotional intelligence research. He was attempting to sort of categorize the 34,000 emotions. He found that we have 8 core emotions. Now, recent researchers in this area have added a 9th. They have added shame as a primary emotion. And the thought is that all other emotions stem from these kind of 8 core emotions. Generally speaking, we have more negative emotions. So if you look at the 34,000 of them, we do have more negative emotions than we do positive emotions. Now that is because of our negative bias, which you probably remember me talking about from the stress personalities webinar. Because of that negative bias and that survival instinct, we tend to identify with and have more negative emotions than positive ones. And again, stress directly influences our emotions. They're intricately tied with one another. Emotions are also out of our control, at least from a reaction standpoint. We don't really necessarily have control over what emotion we're going to feel in a moment. Now, do we have control over our awareness of them and our ability to redirect them? Absolutely, just like we do with our stress response. Our emotions directly impact our performance and our happiness, of course, because they affect our ability to take care of ourselves, relate to other people, relate to ourselves. One theme that we have noticed from the people that we've worked with over the years is that a lack of emotional intelligence, a lack of emotional awareness. So not just how well they recognize their own emotions, but how well they recognize emotions in others, and how well they recognize emotions and how they show up in body language is kind of a key indicator of somebody's ability to really show up at their best. One more piece of information I thought would just be purely interesting to you and not even necessarily relevant to our conversation, but just from one educator to another, I thought you might find it interesting that another piece of the research that has been uncovered in the past 10 or so years is that men and women process certain emotions differently. And based on recent research, women perceive their emotional landscape with more data points than men do. And we see emotional landscape with better resolution. In other words, we have more information and breadth of emotion to react to than men do. In other words, we're a little bit more emotionally aware. And one of the cool parts about that research that I thought you would find interesting is they've been able to correlate that with women, girls, females having higher scoring percentages and performance percentages, academic achievement in areas that have to do with reading and interpreting emotion, verbal reasoning, interpreting text, and those things. So I thought that you would find that interesting. I found it fascinating when I read it. It was not too much of a shocker for me to hear that women are a little bit more emotionally intelligent than men, generally speaking. But I just thought it was really interesting how that related to student achievement. So anyway, going back to it, we used to think that emotions were a separate part of the brain altogether than logic, reason, and decision making. Remember, I kind of simplified things on that first webinar. High Performance Hub was separated from limbic brain, wasn't it? Which was separate from reptile brain. But actually, recent research has proven otherwise, has proven that it's not so disconnected as we used to think. Emotions actually play a huge role in helping us make decisions for ourselves and thinking clearly and rationally, which, of course, as you know, is a huge part of being resilient. This orbital frontal cortex was almost from a last 50 years perspective, was relatively newly discovered part of the brain that was a key link between our high performance hub, decision-making rationale, and our emotional brain. So this part of the brain is where they realized it's highly involved in decision-making and emotional regulation. The emotional brain, historically speaking, has been discounted as a place where we're not thinking clearly about things, but actually it really plays a pretty deep role. And so I thought I would put that in here because when we're talking about stress and resilience, a lot of times even we as professionals in this area tend to try to, or maybe unintentionally, separate logic, reason, attention, rationale, decision-making from emotional intelligence. And this part of the brain is proof in the pudding that we actually need both areas of the brain. And so when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling pressure, when we have problems to solve, when we have decision making that has to be done, when we're reasoning through what's bringing us worry and uncertainty, it's more accurate to say yes and than either or. And what I mean by that is it's not using logic and reason or trusting your gut and listening to your emotions. It's both. Right? So rational thinking, logical reasoning, plus emotional awareness is really what leads to true self-awareness, connection with yourself, which leads to connection with other. And that improves your decision-making and your problem solving, which downstream really leads to more resilience. So in other words, listening to your gut is actually more productive than we thought. The key takeaway here is this: emotions are information. I would love if you would write that down. Emotions are information. They mobilize us to do something. That's their job. And emotionally aware or intelligent people are those who learn to get curious about their emotions and listen to what they're trying to tell us instead of operating in a very non-conscious reactive way. That hindsight 2020, oh, I was really mad an hour ago. What if we started to get curious about our emotions in the moment? So learning to stay aware of them, even and especially under stress, plays a major role in our resilience and our ability to show up and really to stay connected to who we are, what's most important to us, right? So our emotions provide us clues as to whether or not we're in a survival-based place or we're in a little bit more of an opportunity-based place. We call this skill emotional curiosity. So that's what we're going to do today. Is I'm going to present to you a tool that we use to strengthen our clients' emotional curiosity. We're going to send you the slide deck. So I highly suggest just printing out the next slide that I show you, because this chart is the tool that we use. And it's actually really great to use with children as well. And maybe in a simplified version you could recreate, but I tend to really like it as is. So we're going to dive into this aspect a little bit more. Hopefully this helps you distinguish a little bit about how our emotions could be categorized. This is not the be all end all. This is one of many tools out there on emotional intelligence, but I just want you to start thinking about what it looks like when you get curious and start thinking about them. So here's how I'm going to break this down for you. If you can see on the left side of our chart, so we have 4 quadrants. Well, let's just focus on that left side where it says stress zone and burnout. You can think of anything on the left side of this chart as survival-based emotions, generally non-conscious, generally automatic. The right side of the chart you can look at as opportunity-based emotions, okay? So if you look at the top part of the chart, just the top part, we're looking at energy, how much energy we bring to the emotion that we have. And we will look at the bottom part of this chart, we're looking at a little bit of lower energy that comes with the emotion that we have. So that green arrow you see indicates the type of emotion, the quality of emotion we have. Again, survival based on the left, opportunity based, more positive on the right, negative on the left. And then that blue arrow that you see indicates the amount of energy we bring to the situation. So hopefully, as I describe it that way, you can see that we actually have 4 quadrants here and 4 what we would call emotional curiosity or emotional zones that we have. The first one I want to focus on the top right is the high performance zone. We can all probably agree that this is the place we would want to be all the time if we could. This is where we would get our job done most efficiently. We would be happy doing it. We would thrive. We'd be high performers. This is where we would want to walk in the door at the end of the day, being in this high performance zone. And the reason is what? We have lots of energy and positive emotions. So that's our high performance zone. In the high performance zone, the function of this zone, the purpose of these emotions is to energize us, right? To get us to get things done. These are the types of emotions you may see there: connected, purposeful, responsive, energized, passionate, joyful, focus. You can put what you want there. In fact, I'm going to give you a prompt in a little bit to do so. And then I want you to look at the next to the left, the top left part called the stress zone. So in my opinion, if I can't be in the high performance zone and I still need to go to work and get stuff done, I probably want to be in the stress zone. Most of us can probably report that we've been in this zone quite a bit this past year, right? Past few weeks, several months. In the stress zone, we have lots of energy. That's why I said I'd rather be there if I can't be over here on top, right? I have a lot of energy, but the emotions that I'm feeling in this zone are fear-based, negative, right? Non-conscious, automatic. This is a place that I would go when things get hard, when stress response kicks in: anxious, irritated, frustrated, unfocused, defensive, fearful, reactive. This is also the place we find ourselves when we are not oscillating, when we're not inserting moments of recovery, we're not working with that BRAC principle, we're fighting it. Remember, we're working through our workday at a full-blown sprint with no moments of recovery and oscillation. We're likely going to find ourselves very quickly in that stress zone. The positive part of the stress zone is it at least mobilizes us. So if I had a primary function for the stress zone, it would be to mobilize us. Where the high performance zone energizes us, stress zone mobilizes us. And then I want to go down to the low positive. So I'm going to go diagonal now, down and right. In this renewal zone, we are experiencing positive emotions, low energy. So the renewal zone is that peaceful, calm, connected type of emotions. We might feel blissfully joyful here, maybe not as much energy as the one above us, but joyful, rested, calm, relaxed. Maybe our mind starts to wander. We feel quite connected here to ourselves and others. When do we find ourselves in the renewal zone? Weekends, I hope. Vacation times, maybe sometimes after work, maybe before work, maybe when you're spending time with loved ones. The renewal zone is a fantastic place, and it is a place of quite literally renewal. So the function of this quadrant is to renew us, to restore us. This is a restorative place. Lots of people go here occasionally. Not a lot of people go here regularly, which we're going to get to. And then the final quadrant is that burnout zone. So the burnout zone is a place of low energy and negative emotion. This is a place where you're going to feel those tough emotions: sad, disconnected, disengaged, exhausted, hopeless, burned out, grieving. A lot of you reported in the chat feeling like you were kind of in this zone, right? This is a place that we go when for a couple of reasons. Number one, we might find ourselves here because of a loss. Maybe when we are grieving, when there's persistent negative emotion in our life and not a whole lot of recovery. If we spend too long in the stress zone and it's chronic and persistent and it's unmanageable and starts to feel out of our control, we can also find ourselves in the burnout zone. But don't get me wrong, the burnout zone is actually a place that we can go, and it serves a function to heal us. So if there was a primary function of the bottom left quadrant, it would be to heal us. The only difference here is that we don't want to stay there too long. So it is a place we want to be when we are in need of grieving, processing, those types of things. It's also a place we unintentionally find ourselves in. But I want to be very careful that we are not implying that this is a zone to be avoided. Sometimes this is a place you find yourself unintentionally, but it's not a place you want to cover your ears, your eyes, the little monkey emojis on the phone, and pretend you're not there. That's one of the most critical takeaways of this conversation today. Every emotion serves a purpose, but we have to bring awareness that we're there. And so if we find ourselves in the left side of this chart, we obviously don't want to stay there too long. It's not a great place to be. It's not positive-based emotions, but they still serve their purpose. Again, what's the function of an emotion, right? It's to mobilize us to do something. It's information. And so pausing to figure out, what am I feeling? What quadrant am I in? And what do I need to do to get out of it? Now that's the part we're going to get to in a little bit, how. But I just want to sort of impress upon you over and over and over again that all of these quadrants serve a purpose, all of them. We just don't want to stay too long on the left side of that chart, particularly on the bottom left, right? So we'll get to the next part of the how in a little bit, but I want to pause here and I want to reflect. Again, I told you this was going to be a little bit more active. I'm going to kind of look at my timer here for a second. What I would like you to do, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to answer the following questions. This is where you get curious about yourself. And I want you, if you're comfortable, and only if you're comfortable, to share in the chat. And you can, I believe, share anonymously too, if you're comfortable with that. But really the primary function of this exercise is for you to get to know yourself a little bit. So I want you to spend the next few minutes answering the following questions. What predominant emotions are present for you in each quadrant? So if I find myself in the stress zone, going back to our stress personality conversation, what are the primary emotions that show up for me? In which quadrant do you spend most of your time at work? And in what about at home? And then the last question I have is, what percentage of the day do you feel like you were on the left side of that chart? So if we were totaling 100, left side, what would the percentage be? And then you would know what the right side was. So I'm going to kind of be quiet for a second and give you some time to reflect and write these things down. And I'll just keep an eye on the chat. All right, I'm seeing a few answers coming in, so I'm going to start speaking to those a little bit. So I see anxious, exhausted, joyful, connected, at the stress zone at work, renewal zone at home. At least we have a good home renewal zone. That's good. Percentage of the day you're on the left side, 40%. Kylie, I got to tell you, that's not too bad right now. Good job. Laura, I saw you're split up a little bit. So anxious, frustrated, defensive, passionate, joyful, disconnected, calm, and joyful. Good consistency on the joyful piece. And then I saw that you said high performance, at home, thrive. Great. That's great. Haley, I'm going to say, I think it's Haley. Anxious, exhausted, passionate, relaxed, high performance at work and at home, 10% on the left side. Awesome job. And then Maria, I see anxious, sad, joy, engaged, and joyful. I love it. And then high performance, which quadrant you spent most of your time at work. I love that. Thank you guys for sharing. These are really important questions. When we have, and Thrive at Home, thanks, Maria. When we have private clients, we do a lot of work with, actually with a lot of teachers, just like you in your area. We do lots of work with teachers and leadership and in the corporate world. We spend a very long time on this chart. If we're working one-to-one with somebody, we ask these questions and we talk through them for an hour at least. So I hope that gives you a little bit of understanding of how important they are in our world to help our clients improve on their resilience and improve on their ability to show up and connect with themselves and with others. We spend 99% of our waking time, our waking life, focused outside of ourselves, on our to-do lists, on our family members, our friends, our loved ones, our students, our grocery lists, everything, right? Our job. Very, very little time is, our focus is directed inward at ourselves. These kinds of questions really help you to pause and think about, wow, I really am, to Maria's point in her chat, 30% of the time I'm in the left side of that chart. That's not good. That's not bad, Maria. I'm just using it as an example, but how do I change those percentages a little bit? These are important questions. Another question that we ask that I didn't put on here, I just thought it would be too many, is when you walk into a room these days at work, what quadrant are you in? Don't tell me what quadrant you pretend to be in. What quadrant are you in? Because guess what? People feel your energy more than anything. It's not the words that you say, and they can read it in your facial expressions and in your body language. They can tell, they can feel what quadrant you're in. So that question is very important. Now, when I say when you're walking back into your classroom or when you're walking into a meeting at work, what quadrant are you in? But the other important question I might ask is when you get home at the end of the day, what quadrant walks in the door? That's a very important question. And if it's not a quadrant that you would want that energy to spread to your family, to your loved ones, your friends, it's probably pretty important that you think about these things and take action, right? To redirect your emotions to be more positive. I'm sure that you have seen the research out there on how contagious our energy is. Our emotional energy is the same way. It's highly contagious, and it influences our families, our students, our teams. And what it starts to do is direct their emotional energy as well. Now, this isn't always a bad thing, for better or for worse, right? This is a good thing if we know how to recognize it and control it. Now, here's the thing. Like I said before, I just want to, make sure we're normalizing. You can't always force yourself to redirect emotion in the moment. It's not like that. You can't just will yourself into a positive state, but there are things that you can do if you recognize that your emotions are not serving you well. And thank you, by the way, for sharing really, really great stuff. So how do we shift out of emotions that don't serve us well? If we find ourselves on the left side of the chart, we acknowledge that there's a reason for those emotions. We call them out by name. Such an important skill. Can you name and claim your emotion? And then we say, I don't want to feel this emotion right now. I want to redirect. Let's say you're getting home at the end of the day and you're feeling anxious, irritated, totally disconnected and burned. And you want to redirect that. What can you do? This is just like Monopoly. You have to pass go, right? You have to go through renewal. We can't will ourselves to just move back into the high performance zone, nor can we expect there to be there all day long. It's unsustainable. We talked about this BRAC principle, this oscillation principle. I hope you're seeing how much we are harping on recovery, renewal, oscillation, because these are the critical keys to resilience. Is recognizing when you are in need of some sort of redirection, right? I know that those of you who teach in the younger classes know exactly what I'm talking about. When you have a child that is hysterical, crying, having a tantrum, whatever it might be, what do? Right? You don't just tell them to stop. you redirect their energy, you redirect their attention. Our brain is just like that child throwing a temper tantrum. It's in a non-conscious automatic state. It's not focused on you. It's not going to use logic or reason. And so you need to move through renewal. So when you find yourselves on the left side of this chart, this is my point. Go past go to renewal, go to a place of renewal. And I promise you, it will at least help you get the process started of coming back to a positive state. Now, we don't need to exhaust the list again on all these things that bring us renewal, but what I do want to do is I want you to experience it now. Right. Again. So just in case, because a lot of you reported some emotions that didn't seem so positive in the beginning, just in case we've got some of us on this call that are maybe in a quadrant right now that's not serving us. Let's experience a little bit of how to redirect our emotional state to be more positive. First thing I want you to do, good thing there's no videos or anything, so you could do what you want. I want you to get up, move around, stretch, move your body. Physically moving your body. And do that now while I'm talking. You have 30 seconds here. Physically moving your body and redirecting the blood flow that is currently circulating through your body. It is a form of redirection. It can help redirect your mind state. And so going for a walk, stretching, moving your body, right? Your neck, arm circles, push-ups, whatever you want to do. Actually physically moving your body is one way to redirect your emotional state. So you had 30 seconds just now to move. I hope you took advantage of that. And you can keep moving if you want. This is the body pathway. We can redirect using that body pathway. Now, what about the mind pathway? How could we use our mind pathway? I want to do a mindfulness cue with you. In the next 30 seconds, I want you to sit back in your chair and just pause. And I want you to look around whatever room you're in right now. Find 3 things you can see, 2 things you can hear, and 1 thing you can feel. So go ahead and do that now. I'm going to wait for you. 30 seconds. This is one of many mindfulness cues. All we're doing is recruiting blood from reptile brain, fight or flight survival state, back up to high performance hub by engaging our senses and engaging our prefrontal cortex, tapping back into the here and now. For those of you feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, if your head is constantly in the future on your to-do list or in the past or the what ifs, great exercise here to redirect your attention, right? So that's another thing you can do is leverage that mind pathway. I know we've given you a long list of oscillation strategies, and I know this is just a handful of them, but I want you to experience them in the moment. So the next thing I want you to do, I'm actually encouraging you to pull out your phone, even though on the last webinar we were talking about our tethered to tech addiction, but we have 1 minute now. I would like you to pull out your phone, and if you've done this before, maybe fill through this in on the last webinar, I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. We can always use more gratitude in our life. I want you to send a text message to someone expressing your gratitude toward them. Be specific. Don't just say, hey, grateful for you. No, I'm grateful for you because. So I want you to send that to me. And if you're comfortable, share in the chat how it makes you feel, who you texted, those types of things. So go ahead and do that now. If you need to send a quick email too, go ahead. I'm sending one too. If it looks like I'm looking at my phone. I send one every time I put this slide up to either my best friend, my mom, my dad, or my husband, and they always write back now, oh, you must be doing that gratitude exercise. Probably doesn't land well as much as it should. Does anybody want to share with me how that felt, sending that gratitude text? Here's the best part about gratitude and actually expressing it. You are improving your emotional state. And you're doing the same for somebody else. And if we did that often, daily, if we set reminders to do this daily, imagine the positive energy that you are spreading, not just in your circle, but outward, because that person that you express gratitude to might do that to somebody else. This is our spirit pathway that we're tapping into now, our spiritual pathway. hugely, hugely influential on our emotional state. So hopefully you found some value in expressing a little bit of gratitude. Some of you might get text messages back that say, "Are you okay? Why are you sending this?" And if that's you, you need to express more gratitude to that person more often. And tell them you're fine. Tell them you're in the high performance zone right now and you just felt like sending a text. And Maria, oh, that's sweet. Felt good to thank your mom. We don't thank our moms enough, do we? I need to send one of those after this webinar, actually. Thanks for the reminder. Great job, you guys. So if anybody wants to continue sharing what kind of gratitude text or message or email you sent and how it felt, please do. There's a lot of research on volunteering, giving back, gratitude, serving others. Now, listen, this is preaching to the choir with a bunch of educators. That is your life. And so a lot of times the restorative action you need to take is probably not outwardly directed because you do a lot of giving. But there's a lot of great research out there on giving back and serving others and volunteering your time and energy. It doesn't have to be in big chunks, just minute moments like this that has a serious impact on our resilience and our long-term health. And Layla said, sent it to my 2 kids, my greatest treasures. I'm so glad to hear that. That's great. And Laura said, sent one to my sister who does so much for our family. That's so sweet. Thank you for sending that to her. How great. And we had one that said, my husband asked me what he can do to make my week easier. I told him I appreciate him. That's so sweet. And sent a text to my mom. She's the best. I love it. See, doesn't this feel really good? And it's funny, when we deliver these webinars, the most chat engagement we get is when we ask people about this gratitude stuff and we ask them about what brings them joy. Oh, very cool. And along those lines, I want to engage the chat one more time for you. Bringing yourself joy in some way, any way you can spark joy is also a great renewal. So again, just sort of layering onto that spiritual pathway. So I want you to put into the chat now, what's your favorite way to spark joy? A hobby, a picture, a memory, a talent, a funny video? What would it be for you? I get so many different answers here. So I just want you to really flood the chat and just tell me, what are the things that really bring you joy? I'll send it to your daughter's teacher, gratitude text. That's a good idea. I need to send mine. I express a lot of gratitude to my teachers for my kids, my boys, because they're a handful. Good job. So I want you to put in the chat right now, what is your favorite way to spark joy? What's the favorite thing you like to do for yourself? There's a lot of studies actually, but they're starting to find out that spending 20% of your time on something that brings you joy, they found that spending time bringing yourself joy, about 20% of your time, improves your resilience, your long-term health, et cetera, much like the volunteering and the gratitude and those types of things. Not more than 20%, didn't have any sort of measurable impact. But what if you don't have 20% of the time? That's okay. What if you just took a moment to spark joy? And so Laura says, reading, competitive sailing, very cool, with your husband, bonsai, making felt ornaments. Awesome. Awesome. And even just to take the example of reading, let's just say it's in the middle of a busy work day. You don't have the time to read, but you have a minute. What could you do with that minute? And you love to read. One thing you could do is just pick out the next book. You could just browse, a list of new releases or whatnot, and you could just pick out the next one. If you really like to cook and you find yourself just swamped in grading and paperwork, and you can't cook a full meal right then, even though you wish you could you just pick your next meal? Because even that minute moment will actually spark and bring joy. So a couple people, being out in nature, hiking with your dog and your boyfriend, music and exercising. When you want to pick yourself up and turn on your favorite music and sing and dance in the living room. I love that. Music has that power, doesn't it? So these are great things you could do to spark joy. And again, don't underestimate the connection connection between joy and resilience and long-term health. So any way that you can be intentional. And what we're doing with all these examples is we're just equipping our tool belt. The more things you have in your tool belt in all the different pathways, the better for you. So I want to show you, see if I put it up here. Maria, you just did it for me. Spending time with your family and laughing until you can't breathe. My spark joy is laughter. I love jokes. I love funny videos. And thankfully, I have a 12-year-old boy who is now an expert at, YouTube and all things like that, funny memes and things. And so when I'm feeling kind of down, I'll just ask him to show me something funny. And recently, he showed me a picture or a video of baby goats screaming, and it cracked me up. And so I'm going to share it with you. Are you ready? Listen to this. Baby goats screaming. I'd never seen this before. I'm going to watch it one more time because I think that's so funny. That is so bizarre to me, and I think it's hilarious. I just had to include it as a short little video here, but just jokes, funniness, anything like that. It's just such a good way to redirect energy. One other thing that I haven't seen yet in the chat that I wanted to touch on, connection with coworkers. Now, it doesn't always have to be in person. So if you're not quite back to where you can spend physical time together, text messages, Zoom, whatever you can possibly do, 6 feet apart if you're back on campus. There have been a lot of cool studies. Most recently, one came out of South Korea, and it found that spending time talking to coworkers about non-work related subjects actually had a better impact on our health and our emotional well-being than a healthy snack or 10 minutes of exercise. Isn't that funny? I'm not suggesting that you get rid of all your exercise and your healthy eating and just spend time with your coworkers only. I'm saying do it all, but I just thought it was really interesting that they found that spending time talking to your coworkers about non-work related things had that much of an impact on your health and your happiness. And so that's another thing I wanted to throw out as an option that you're probably already naturally doing, but it's something that maybe you could put in your tool belt as a thing that you could use if you find yourself, if you're checking out that emotional curiosity chart and realizing that you're on the left side of that chart and that you need to redirect, right? So no more goats. Last kind of thing I wanted to just sort of tie up all this. Emotions are information. Don't forget that. They're not bad. They're not good. There's positive and negative emotions, but none of them are to be avoided ever, to be conquered, to be stuffed. Even the really big emotions, the ones that feel out of our control, I want you to greet them with curiosity because they're information trying to mobilize you to do something. So what is it that they're trying to make you do? If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's time to pause. If you're feeling grief and sadness, it's time to pause and take care of yourself. Seek help for that. Whether it's connection with a friend or something bigger than that. What is that emotion trying to get you to do? Pausing to get curious and renewal and redirection are critical to building emotional resilience, synonymous with emotional intelligence. So what can you do rather than be reactive? What if you were responsive? What if you took charge of this area? Maybe this is one of those webinars that sits with you where you feel lately like you're totally out of control of your emotions. If it does resonate with you, print out the curiosity chart. Put it on your door in your office or put it on your desk and check in with yourself a couple of times a day. Set reminders if you have to. Put it on your bathroom mirror in the morning, like we do with the Post-it notes I've been, suggesting all along. Leverage that emotional curiosity chart. If you have a team meeting, why don't you all check in right before the meeting and everybody talk about what quadrant you're in? that's actually really, really valuable connection building opportunity. What if you use it with your students? What if you use it with your children or your significant other, your partner? There's a lot of ways that you can use this chart. You don't have to use this chart. You could just set reminders to check in with yourself. And you could just say, generally, do I feel a positive or negative emotion? What is it? And how can I redirect? Whatever it is, being intentional about checking in with yourself and being curious, hugely, hugely advantageous skill. And what's going to start to happen is you're going to start strengthening that muscle of being able to recognize and redirect emotion in the moment, rather than looking back at how you were feeling earlier in the day. You'll start to catch yourself in the moment. You'll catch yourself before you walk into a room. You'll catch yourself when you're feeling disengaged and burned and all of the other emotions that you indicated here, anxious, irritated, overwhelmed. And you'll be able to take one of these tools out of your tool belt and work toward redirecting those emotions. So I hope you found that valuable. I'm going to give you a minute or so. And what I want to do is just have you reflect, take note of any ahas, any takeaways that you thought you want to make sure you don't miss. And I'll use that moment to wait and see if there are any questions in the chat as well. You're very welcome. Thank you for the sweet message. I appreciate it. For what it's worth, for those of you, thinking of ways you can use this, we have this chart printed out. And sometimes if my kids are just in a really bad mood, they're 10 and 12, I'll have them check out what emotion they're feeling on the little quadrant chart. I don't use it often anymore. They're a little older, but we do all actually still use it. It's printed out. It's on our refrigerator, just checking in on it here and there. But it was really great when they were younger, when they were a little bit younger than 10 and 12, because they had to actually name and claim their emotion. And that is an incredibly valuable skill that not a lot of adults have. And so if we can train them up as youngins to be emotionally aware, they're going to be so resilient when they're older. Do we have any questions? Anything that you want clarity on? One more thing as I'm waiting, see if my slide is laggy a little bit. So I know that we've mentioned it before. I know because you have them on your schedules, but I just want to give you this quick reminder that these huddles that we have scheduled for your schools, you get 2 of them. So you've probably seen one on your calendar already, probably have been on one. The point of these is to make sure that we are pausing and checking in with ourselves and how we're doing. I know it feels like another thing to do. I know it does. And I'm sorry that it feels that way. What I want to just have a quick note on is to connect me to these wonderful, lovely women here, is to just make sure that you know that these are my people, these are my coaches, and they're here to help you engage with this information and check in with yourselves and with each other. And hopefully you're leveraging some of those breakouts and really connecting with each other and talking through such a hard time, and I just want to also let you know, they're not on this call, I don't think, but they are absolutely loving working with you all. And so we're all incredibly grateful for how you are serving these students. And they're really enjoying talking to you. So thank you for that. And thank you for the sweet messages. I'm getting a few messages here about having a bad day, and thanks for making me feel better. I really appreciate that. So listen, that's all I had. I'll give you 4 minutes back if there aren't any other questions, but I am going to hang around for a little bit just to make sure that nobody has any further questions. But the last thing I was going to show you is your very last webinar, April 26th, Setting Healthy Boundaries. This is a very, very cool webinar, and we will get active on it again. I'm going to have you doing work one more time and thinking about some pretty cool subjects, boundaries and values. So I hope you join us for that, and we'll see you in April or on a huddle. So thank you so much. And again, I'm going to sit here just to make sure that there aren't any other questions. But have a great night.